The final moments of John Lennon. How the end really happened. New York City, December 8, 1980. The Dakota Building, a Gothic sentinel overlooking Central Park, its ancient stones holding countless stories. But on this cold Monday evening, it would become the silent witness to a tragedy that would shatter a generation. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of exhaust fumes and the distant murmur of the city that never slept. For John Lennon, the Dakota was more than just a home. It was a sanctuary, a place where he had found a fragile peace after years of chaos, fame, and relentless scrutiny. He had spent the day in Studio One at the Hit Factory working on Walking on Thin Ice, a new track with Yoko. The session had been productive, filled with the creative energy that had defined his life. He was happy, content, or looking forward to the future, but a shadow had been lurking. Not the usual paparazzi, not the persistent fans. This was different. A presence. A man named Mark Chapman, who had been waiting, patiently, obsessively. Chapman had been outside the Dakota earlier that day, clutching a copy of Double Fantasy, the album John and Yoko had just released. He had asked John for an autograph. John, ever gracious, had signed it. A moment captured by a fan's camera, a chilling tableau of innocence and impending doom. Now, as John and Yoko's limousine pulled up to the Dakota's archway, returning from the studio, the night had fallen. The city lights twinkled, oblivious to the horror about to unfold. John stepped out first, Yoko a few paces behind him. He carried a reel of tape, the day's work, the promise of new music. He was home, safe, or so he thought. He didn't see the shadow detach itself from the archway. He didn't hear the footsteps. He didn't know that the man he had signed an autograph for just hours earlier was now holding a .38 caliber revolver. What happened next would last mere seconds, but those seconds would echo through history, silencing one of the most iconic voices of the 20th century and leaving the world in a state of collective shock and grief. This is how the end really happened. December 8, 1980, began like any other day for John Lennon. He woke in his beloved Dakota apartment, a place he had meticulously decorated, filled with art, books, and the warmth of his family. He had breakfast with Yoko and their 5-year-old son, Sean. The domestic bliss he had fought so hard to achieve. He was in a good place, creatively and personally. His Double Fantasy was a success, a triumphant return to music after 5 years of self-imposed retirement. He was excited about new projects, new songs, new possibilities. His schedule for the day was typical: a photo shoot with Annie Leibovitz, where he famously posed nude with Yoko, a powerful image of vulnerability and love. Then, a radio interview with RKO Radio, where he spoke about his music, his life, and his hopes for the future. He talked about his desire to make music that was both personal and universal, about his belief in peace, and about the importance of family. "I consider that my work won't be finished until I'm dead and buried," he told the interviewer, a chillingly prophetic statement. After the interview, he and Yoko headed to the Hit Factory. The atmosphere in the studio was vibrant. They were working on Walking on Thin Ice, a track that showcased Yoko's avant-garde sensibilities, with John providing guitar. He was supportive, collaborative, fully engaged in their shared artistic vision. Meanwhile, across town, Mark Chapman was meticulously executing his own dark plan. He had flown from Hawaii, obsessed with John Lennon, fueled by a twisted mix of religious fanaticism, celebrity worship, and a desperate need for recognition. He had stalked the Dakota for days, waiting for his moment. He carried a copy of J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, a book he identified with, seeing himself as Holden Caulfield, the disillusioned protagonist. He believed Lennon was a phony, a hypocrite who preached peace and lived in luxury. At around 5 p.m., as John and Yoko left the Dakota for the studio, Chapman approached. John, ever accessible to his fans, signed the Double Fantasy album. The photograph taken by Paul Goresh, a fellow fan, captured the moment. John, smiling, signing the record, Chapman standing beside him, a chilling calm on his face. "Is that all you want?" John asked. Chapman nodded. "Yeah." John and Yoko got into their limousine, heading to the studio. Chapman remained, waiting. He knew they would return. He knew his moment was coming. The day, for John, was a tapestry of creation, love, and hope. For Chapman, it was a countdown to destruction. Two parallel narratives, unknowingly converging towards a single, devastating point. Hey, before we continue with this incredible story, I need to give you an important warning. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube has removed their subscriptions without notice. Just take a quick look at the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I don't want you to miss any of the exclusive content that's coming up. And while you're there, leave that powerful like that helps me a lot with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who is part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's interact. It was just after 10:50 p.m. The limousine pulled up to the Dakota's archway. John and Yoko had decided against driving into the inner courtyard, a decision that would prove fatal. They wanted to get home quickly, to see Sean before he went to bed. John, carrying the master tapes of Walking on Thin Ice, stepped out first. Yoko followed, a few steps behind him. The night was cold, the air still. As they walked towards the entrance, a figure emerged from the shadows. Mark Chapman. He called out, "Mr. Lennon?" John turned, perhaps expecting another autograph request, another fan. Chapman dropped into a combat stance, a .38 caliber Charter Arms revolver in his hands. The first shot rang out, a deafening crack in the quiet night. John cried out, "Ah!" He spun around, clutching his chest. Chapman fired again, and again, and again, 5 shots in total. 4 struck John in the back and left shoulder. Yoko, witnessing the horror unfold, screamed, a piercing, agonizing sound that tore through the night. John stumbled, dropping the tapes. He staggered a few steps, then collapsed onto the ground, his glasses falling from his face. The Dakota's doorman, Jose Perdomo, rushed out, disarming Chapman, who offered no resistance. Chapman calmly removed his coat, placed it on the ground, and sat down, pulling out The Catcher in the Rye and beginning to read. Yoko knelt beside John, cradling his head. John, do you know me?" she pleaded, her voice choked with terror. John, his eyes wide, his breath shallow, managed to whisper, "Yeah." Those were his last words. Perdomo, stunned, asked Chapman, "Do you know what you've done?" Chapman, without looking up from his book, replied, "I just shot John Lennon." The scene was surreal. The iconic musician, bleeding on the pavement of his sanctuary, his wife screaming in anguish, the killer calmly reading a book. The first police car arrived within minutes. Officers rushed to John's side, trying to render aid. They saw the severity of his wounds. Yet there was no time to wait for an ambulance. They lifted John into the back of the police cruiser, Yoko scrambling in beside him, still clutching his head. The car sped off, sirens wailing, towards Roosevelt Hospital. The Dakota's shadow, once a symbol of home and safety, now loomed as a monument to a senseless act of violence. The world was about to lose its most famous dreamer. The police cruiser, with John Lennon bleeding in the back seat and Yoko screaming beside him, raced through the New York streets. Every second counted. At Roosevelt Hospital, the emergency room staff were already on high alert. A call had come in. A shooting victim. Critical condition. They didn't know it was John Lennon. As the car screeched to a halt, officers carried John into the trauma bay. The medical team immediately began resuscitation efforts. Dr. Sir Stephen G. Lynn, the director of the emergency room, quickly assessed the situation. John had lost an enormous amount of blood. The bullets had caused catastrophic damage to his aorta and major blood vessels. His heart had stopped. Yoko, frantic, was ushered into a waiting room. She was in shock, barely able to comprehend the nightmare unfolding around her. The doctors worked tirelessly, performing a thoracotomy, opening his chest to try and massage his heart, to clamp the damaged vessels. They pumped blood into him, desperately trying to replace what he had lost. For 20 minutes, they fought against the clock, against the irreversible damage. Outside the hospital, news of the shooting began to leak. Radio stations interrupted their broadcasts. Television channels flashed breaking news alerts. The world, slowly, agonizingly, began to learn that something terrible had happened to John Lennon. Fans, journalists, and curious onlookers started to gather outside the Dakota, then outside Roosevelt Hospital. A growing crowd, their faces etched with disbelief and fear. Inside the trauma bay, the doctors continued their grim work. They knew the odds were against them. The damage was too severe. The blood loss too great. Dr. Lynn made the call. At 11:15 p.m., John Lennon was pronounced dead. The news was delivered to Yoko Ono. Her world, already shattered, crumbled completely. She was led into the trauma bay to see him one last time. She touched his face, whispered words of love, and placed her wedding ring on his finger. The announcement to the public was made by Dr. Lynn, his voice heavy with the weight of the moment. Mr. Lennon was dead on arrival. The words echoed across the globe, silencing conversations, stopping lives, plunging millions into a collective state of grief and disbelief. The race against time had been lost. The voice that had inspired a generation was gone, and the world would never be the same. The news hit like a physical blow. Across New York, across America, across the entire world, people reacted with stunned silence, then with an outpouring of raw, visceral grief. Radio stations played John Lennon's music on repeat. Television channels broke into regular programming with special reports. The phone lines jammed. In Liverpool, his hometown, the news was met with a profound sense of loss and betrayal. The boy who had left to conquer the world had been taken too soon, too violently. Fans gathered spontaneously. Outside the Dakota, a vigil began to form. Candles were lit, flowers were laid. People stood in stunned silence, holding hands, crying, singing his songs. The image of John Lennon, the dreamer, the peace activist, being gunned down outside his home, was a brutal contradiction. It felt like an attack on hope itself. Paul McCartney, reached by reporters, struggled for words. "It's a drag, isn't it?" he said, his voice thick with emotion. The casualness of the phrase belied the depth of his pain. George Harrison and Ringo Starr were equally devastated, issuing statements of profound sorrow. The Beatles, once an unbreakable unit, were now forever fractured. The world struggled to comprehend the senselessness of the act. Why John Lennon? Why the man who preached peace and love? Mark Chapman, the killer, remained at the scene, calm, though almost serene. He was arrested without incident, his motive a twisted tapestry of delusion and envy. He wanted to steal Lennon's fame, to become somebody by destroying somebody. The immediate aftermath was a blur of grief, anger, and confusion. But beneath the surface, a deeper realization began to set in. John Lennon was gone. His physical presence, his voice, his creative spark. But his message, his music, his spirit, those would live on. They would become even more powerful in his absence. The world had stopped for a moment. But in that silence, the echoes of John Lennon's dreams began to resonate louder than ever before. The end had come, but the legacy was just beginning. In the days and weeks that followed, the world grappled with the void left by John Lennon's death. The vigil outside the Dakota grew into a global phenomenon. Millions mourned, tributes poured in from every corner of the earth. Yoko Ono, with incredible strength, guided the world through its grief. She asked for 10 minutes of silent prayer on December 14th, a global moment of remembrance. Millions participated, a testament to John's unifying power. His music, especially Imagine, became an anthem for a wounded world. It was played everywhere, a collective prayer for the peace he had championed. His calls for love, for unity, for understanding took on a new, urgent significance. The tragedy forced a re-evaluation of John Lennon's life and work. He was no longer just a Beatle, or a pop star, or an activist. He was a symbol, a martyr for peace. His unfinished projects, the songs he was working on, and the dreams he still held, all became part of his enduring myth. The walking on thin ice tape he carried that night, the last piece of music he worked on, became a poignant artifact of his final creative moments. His death also sparked a renewed conversation about gun violence, about celebrity obsession, and about the dark side of fame. But amidst the sorrow, there was also a profound sense of continuation. John Lennon's message, his spirit, had not been silenced, it had been amplified. His life, though tragically cut short, had left an indelible mark on the world. He had inspired millions to question, to dream, to imagine a better future. He had started with 3 chords and a dream in a Liverpool alley. He had built an empire of sound, a legacy of ideas. And even in his absence, his influence continued to grow, now touching new generations, inspiring new artists, challenging the status quo. The symphony of his life remained unfinished, but its echoes would resonate forever. New York City, December 8, 1980. The final moments of John Lennon were brutal, senseless, and swift. But the impact of those moments continues to reverberate. Decades later, Mark Chapman remains in prison, his twisted motivations forever etched into the narrative of that night. His act of violence, intended to gain recognition, instead condemned him to infamy and obscurity. Yoko Ono, with remarkable resilience, became the guardian of John's legacy, ensuring his music and his message continued to reach the world. She raised Sean, a living testament to the love that had defined John's later years. The Dakota Building still stands, a landmark, a home, and a permanent reminder of the tragedy that unfolded beneath its archway. Strawberry Fields, a memorial garden in Central Park, now serves as a place of pilgrimage for fans from around the globe, a tranquil space dedicated to peace. The question, how the end really happened, isn't just about the bullets and the blood. It's about the profound shift it caused in the collective consciousness. It's about the moment the world lost a voice, but gained an eternal echo. John Lennon's death was a brutal end to a brilliant life, but it was also the beginning of an enduring legend. He had dared to imagine a world without possessions, without greed, without hunger, a brotherhood of man. And in his final moments, even as his life was violently taken, that dream, that vision, became more powerful than ever. His music, his words, his spirit, they continue to inspire, to challenge, to comfort. They remind us that peace is a constant struggle, that love is the ultimate answer, and that even in the face of senseless violence, hope can endure. The final moments of John Lennon were not the end of his story. They were the catalyst for its eternal beginning. The bullet holes in the Dakota's archway were repaired long ago. The blood washed away, but the scar remains, a permanent mark on the heart of a city and on the soul of a generation. And the voice of John Lennon, though silenced, still sings, an eternal echo, reminding us to imagine the end. If this story about the tragic end and enduring legacy of John Lennon moved you, subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone who needs to hear that even in the darkest moments, hope and inspiration can live on. What song or message of John Lennon's resonates most deeply with you? Tell us in the comments below.